Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here today. For those of you who don't already know me, my name is Shakina Lee, and I've been running my own business on the Gold Coast for over 15 years called Honouring the Feminine. So today we're here to talk about birth. And every birth story has medicine to share, sometimes for ourselves, sometimes for other people. But really the most important thing to remember is that every birth story and every birth experience, from pregnancy through to labour, through to motherhood, is a rite of passage experience. It's a hero's journey. So, what juicy things can we get into today? I'm so excited to have Stacey with me.
Lots of interesting conversation.
So many interesting conversations. And look, I did just want to share with you that, you know, the inspiration for doing these birth story interviews came from speaking with Stacey, because I was putting my Motherhood Rite of Passage birthing program online, and she was the amazing lady who was helping me create that course. I mean, the course is already created, but, you know, doing all of the technical stuff that I'm not so amazing with. So we can thank her for having this inspirational idea, and that's why I'm really, really happy to have her here as the first one. And I guess a little background on me and, you know, why I felt passionate about even doing birthing programs, or why I'm passionate about birthing stories, is, you know, when I gave birth over 14 years ago to my daughter, I had a cascade of unwanted and possibly unnecessary interventions, which led to an emergency cesarean. And, you know, even though I know now that there is no perfect recipe for the perfect birth, it did leave me feeling like I'd failed not only myself, but my baby, my daughter as well. And so that led me on my own, you know, self-discovery and healing journey, and that led me to creating the Motherhood Rite of Passage program.
Yeah. Which is exciting.
It is really exciting.
It's a beautiful program. You should be so proud of yourself. So proud of yourself.
Thank you. So let's get into the interview. So as I said, I'm here with Stacey. She's from the Social Hub, and she is a mother of two. Yep. Both girls?
Yep, two girls. Marley's nearly 10, going on about 30. And Ella is, she'll be 12 in a couple of weeks. So she's just about to finish up primary school and start high school next year. So big times ahead. That is lots of changes in our house at the moment.
And, you know, that is one of the first rites of passage experiences we go on as humans. You know, we have our own birth that we do, and then, you know, as girls, I don't know if your girls, you know, have gone through, you know, their puberty or got their period yet, but that
it's coming.
Yeah, so usually that transition,
it's coming really soon.
from primary school to high school is the first major kind of like shake up, where they move from little kid to, oh, hang on, I'm not more than a little kid anymore. So
100%.
How perfect. So the first question that I wanted to ask you today is if you could just briefly share some of your birth story with us.
Yeah, for sure. So firstly, I'd like to thank you for having me. It's actually really cool to be doing this face-to-face with someone, because normally I'm on Zoom and I'm sharing the screen with other people. So it's nice actually to have a real person here to touch.
I know. I like being with a real person.
So that's really nice. And it's really nice to see this series come to life. So I'm really passionate, even though my business is all in digital marketing, I'm really passionate about empowering women. And I think that there's a lot of women out there that hold space for that, and you hold space in this way, and I think that's really beautiful. So thank you for having me. My birth story, I think, like, we bonded in the program, the Course Creation Project, over the concept of the Motherhood Rite of Passage, because when we were going through those first few weeks and you came forward with what your concept was, I was like, oh, I think this is amazing. It's a great conversation to bring forward to women and to the community. And I know that even though I had my kids 10 and 12 years ago, I'm aware that I had and maybe still have some unresolved trauma from the experience on a few different levels, because yes, back then I had community and I had friends, but it wasn't as, Facebook and Instagram weren't like this, back then.
No,
we
not
didn't
at all.
have this information at our fingertips, and you were really at the mercy of, whoever was your most influential person at the time.
Exactly.
And that was only 12 years ago. So it's not like we're talking a long time, but just life's come a long way since then.
So much has changed, even in the last 5 years. But that's as I was saying, my daughter, I gave birth 14 years ago, and we had birth books and birth professionals and friends and family stories. Yeah. Facebook, I don't even think I was on it that long ago. Even Googling wasn't a big thing. I know that's making us sound really old, but seriously, so much has changed. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think even the process of birth, it was still more of a clinical process. Yeah. I think, I'm trying to remember back to when I was pregnant with Ella, and midwives that came to your house, that was a really new thing. Absolutely. I had a friend who had that experience, and I went, what do you mean they come to your house? You have to see them at hospital. I was so confused. Yeah. And so that was really starting to come about and I'm not saying it wasn't always there, but just in the circles that I was in, I wasn't aware of it back then. So that's probably more of where I'm getting at. But with my first daughter, Ella, so we had quite a journey to falling pregnant. I had a number of miscarriages. Was told, the whole nine, not sure how many you're going to be able, not sure how many more miscarriages you'll go through. Yeah. Then there was that whole, am I ever going to become a mother? So kind of dealing with that process, and that was quite stressful. And, if I'm perfectly honest, I think that experience before even having kids put a chink in the marriage I was in at the time that never really healed because that was a really traumatic thing for me to go through at the time, because I hadn't had any children already, and I was like, oh, am I going to actually become a mother? So then my pregnancy with Ella was very emotional. It was a very emotional pregnancy. I'm very in touch with my emotions, but I'm not an overly emotional person. So that was really hard to
Pregnancy's deal really with. Good like that. Mm-hmm.
That was really hard.
Hands up if you got really emotional through pregnancy.
On so many levels, which I was kind of not really prepared for. I don't think anything can really prepare you for it. But so it was very emotional, lots of ups and downs, and eventually had her by being induced. Yeah. And it wasn't a great birth. So she was, is it posterior, where they're back to back? Yeah. It was extremely painful. Mm-hmm. And I kind of went into it with this perception that I was going to be able to do it all drug-free and have this beautiful, energetic experience where I was going to birth my baby, and then I was going to breastfeed, and it was going to be like a Huggies commercial, basically. And that's the way, that's what it was going to be like. Because all of my friends at the time, had all had drug-free births and all breastfed beautifully, like these beautiful native women. And I'd had the exact opposite experience, where it was totally drugged up birth. And, physically there was a lot of trauma. They had to, I should have really been a C-section. I don't want to go into too many gory details, but they had to break her collarbone to get her out. It was that tight. And so you can imagine the physical trauma for me and for her was not good. And I remember thinking that the birthing suite just looked like a crime scene afterwards. So it wasn't physically a great experience. And then that kind of flowed over then onto being able to breastfeed, all the drugs that were in my system to get through the pregnancy and the birth was those first 2 weeks. They say baby blues hits on day 3 and it lasts for a couple of days. I felt like it lasts for a few weeks. And I think it's because my body was just trying to process not only what had happened, but all the drugs that were in it as well.
Absolutely, yeah, that's so huge.
And trying to, rebirth me into, nearly spilt my tea, into this new person who was a mother. So that was kind of my experience, and I think, like, if I had maybe gone through that experience now, I may have felt more supported, but because of the way society was set up back then, I felt alone. I didn't feel like anyone really knew what it was like to go through that, because my support network hadn't, and I didn't have people online to talk to about this stuff and go, oh, I'm not crazy.
And that's why we correlate that whole birthing journey with the rite of passage experience, because there's usually, and there's, I actually don't know any women who at some period of that birthing journey, whether it is in conception or whether it's through pregnancy or whether it's through the actual labour and birth, or if it's postnatally through breastfeeding or postnatal depression or birth trauma, where, the nature of a rite of passage is that there is some crunchy part where you get challenged and you have to surrender and you feel broken wide open and you die to your old way of being. You're not the caterpillar anymore. And you don't just sprout wings one day to become a butterfly. You are that gooey mess in the cocoon. And more often than not, it is through that place where we have to fully surrender to, birth, open and birth our babies. But it can be in different places for different people. And, you had it in a few places. You had it there in that conception, and the fear of, can I even bring this pregnancy to full term? Am I ever going to be a mother?
Yeah.
And I know, because I do so much pregnancy massage and postnatal massage, and I've seen so many women who have had multiple miscarriages, and they're holding on so tight because they don't want to lose their baby, of course.
Yeah.
And quite often, if, we can't address that before the birth, they can have difficult births because you've got to be able to open and let go and surrender.
Yes, yeah. I mean,
and when you're holding on tight, no, I don't want to lose this baby, no, I don't want to lose this baby, and you're doing it unconsciously, then Yeah. And I'm not saying that's why baby's collarbone needed to be broken or anything like that, but, it's just so very interesting to me to have seen so many women, and when that fear is there, those birth tigers, we call them, and we don't face them head on and have some resolution, then it does. It has a flow-on effect.
Yeah. Look, I mean, 110% there is a lot of physical reasons why it went the way that it did.
Yeah.
But there is 100% a lot of energetic reasons it went the way that it did. Yes. So, and I'm fully aware of that.
And that's why, in my own journey of wanting to heal my own traumatic birth experience, I realised there was no perfect recipe for the perfect birth, because I saw two women who planned exactly the same way and ended up with two completely different births. And then I saw two women who had the complete same birth and felt completely different about it, So it's so subjective, what the perfect birth is. And, I made the mistake, and I know that other women have felt this way too, of thinking, if I just did that differently, if I just had a different support person, or if I just had a different carer, or if I had have insisted on this, or if I had have done that, then I would have had this amazing, perfect, ecstatic, natural, Huggies commercial birth.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, that there are so many layers, like you're saying, both physically, energetically, the stories we bring from our past, who we're surrounded by at the time. And yes, there are sometimes unnecessary interventions, but it's very hard to pin a traumatic birth on just one particular thing.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. So I'm glad we touched on that. So what was the most memorable part of your birth experience then?
Oh, still 100% holding the baby.
Yeah.
Like, even though I was like looking at it through this like drug hazed moment, but
Brittany.
It was, hey Brittany, how are you? 100% that was still the best thing. And even as traumatic physically and mentally and emotionally as what it still was like, it was all worth it.
Yes.
Like I survived, maybe 100 years ago I may not have physically survived it. So there was still that immense, gratitude and love for this child. And I think it's a true testament to the fact that a mother's love is so strong that you can go through that traumatic experience and it's inbuilt in you to still love that child.
Yep.
If anyone else had hurt us as much as what birth hurts us, we would not forgive
I know.
or love, or we would find it hard to love that person. So we'd have to do a lot of inner work, you know, if someone hurt us that much. But with our children, they hand you the child, and all of a sudden you forget about it.
Yeah.
So even though there was, you know, a lot of challenging moments for me in that experience, the best part was still having her. Yeah.
And so good to touch on that not all mums do feel that bonding straight away, especially if you've had lots of drugs, because, you know, it really does affect that whole blood-brain barrier of the oxytocin release, which is the bonding hormone.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I know that a lot of women feel really guilty about not feeling bonded straight away. I know a lot of women don't remember their birthing experience yet, because I was induced as well, and I was full of all of that syntocin. I feel like I remember the whole thing, and it was one of the major reasons I went, I won't be doing that again. There was no fuzzy kind of Vaseline filter put over my birthing experience. It was like, I remember all of that. I remember all of the trauma.
Yeah, I think, like, there was definitely a few things. Even though in that first initial moment there was that washover of love, I think going forward from that, though, there was a few things that I really struggled with bonding, you know, because I couldn't breastfeed. I had to bottle feed her. And I attribute a lot of that just from the trauma my body went through. My body just went, you cannot do one more thing physically. And this is what you cannot do now. And again, there was a lot of guilt around not being able to do that. I thought I was a terrible mother, like all those things. And I had to find ways to bond with her other than that one thing that everyone else said just magically bonded you to your child, because that wasn't my experience. So I totally understand why when women go through something traumatic, and sometimes even your birth isn't traumatic and they don't have that initial feeling, or they struggle in later weeks or months. And that's just some people's story as well.
And mummy guilt, where does it actually begin? It is a thing, isn't it? Like,
I think it begins before you even conceive them.
Yeah.
I mean, and particularly these days in society, it's even worse, because it's like, you know, there's so much information out there about how to prepare yourself for pregnancy, and you shouldn't be eating this, and you shouldn't be doing this, and you should be, you know, having a low whatever diet, and not have coffee, and not do this and not do that. And every time a little sip of coffee passes your lips, all of a sudden you feel guilty. So that guilt is there,
isn't it?
So
Isn't
early,
it incredible?
so early.
Yeah, and I remember that. You know, I felt so guilty that we were full of drugs, and my baby was full of drugs, and we hadn't had this beautiful experience that. You know, I was always going to breastfeed, but I breastfed for longer than I felt was healthy for me, because I needed to make it up to her, needed to make up, you know, for that horrible traumatic experience we had. So I'm just going to keep breastfeeding, you know. So fascinating.
Yeah, I think, like, even to, like, modern society, the image of a woman for a long time in modern society is that, you know, the man bestows the gift of the woman being able to carry the child, and then the woman has the child, and then you look after the child, and you be like this little Susie homemaker, and you raise this child. But the modern percent is that you're doing it alone. Whereas if you go back into history, it was the tribe.
It takes a village.
Like, the tribe nurtured and cared for this woman and helped her through the birth and helped her after the birth, and she wasn't alone. But now we are alone a lot of the time.
And that does take me into my next question. Yes. Did you feel supported through your birthing experience? How was your support network?
Yes and no, for different reasons. Like, in the actual birth room, my mum was there, thank God, because my husband at the time was no help. But at the same time, I've always been a very strong person. I just don't think he knew how to deal with me in a weak moment. Where I wasn't able to be strong. I needed help. Like, I was broken, basically. So I just think that was just not a dynamic we'd experienced before, and he found that really difficult. But I had my mum there, thank goodness. Look, it's funny, like, you know, 12 years ago I had great friends who were so supportive, and I never felt the need to have to go to a mother's group or anything like that, because I had a network that had children, and I could have these conversations, but I hadn't had anyone have the same experience as me. I actually know I had one friend who had a traumatic first birth. We did really bond over that. But it was one in a sea. It was more, I felt like I was more the minority. So that was difficult. And then, you know, the post-birth support system, like from I guess a medical point of view, like I said, all the doulas and all the beautiful midwives and everything you can access now weren't as well. It wasn't as well communicated 12 years ago.
As well. The continuity of care wasn't really there.
So you kind of felt like I was fumbling around, and you were really at the mercy of, you know, whatever clinician you saw at the time. And I don't know that you know, when you're putting such a energetic experience as birthing a child and what a woman's going through in those moments and the weeks and months after in a clinical environment, that clinical part of the process is only filling one need. It's not filling the other needs. And so even though I felt physically there was a clinical, yes, I was being looked after, there was a lot of other aspects I didn't feel supported. It wasn't really
a holistic approach.
No, not at all.
You know, a decade or so ago, it was very segregated. We just want to make sure you live and your baby lives, which is amazing, of course. That's what we really want. But making sure that there was a holistic approach and understanding that this is a rite of passage, or that this is also a spiritual and emotional experience for a woman, especially that first birth when you're moving from maiden to mother, like you were not a mother before you give birth. You know, through pregnancy, I know we can feel like we're a mother, and we're certainly getting prepared for motherhood. But, you know, the moment that baby's born, that's it. You're mum now, you know.
And I think it's important to know that, like I had really supportive friends. I had great people around me, and all those things. And I'm in no way diminishing. Like I had people drop off food. You know, I had people come and take, you know, when I had Marley, I had people come and take the 2-year-old off me at the time. I'd had people come over and do my dishes and things like that. But I think it's important to note that sometimes, even though you've got all that going on around you, you can still feel lonely. And that's okay. And I think we just need to acknowledge that and be able to talk about it more, because it doesn't mean that you don't appreciate what everyone's doing. It just means that that's how you feel.
And, you know, that's a really important part of the Motherhood Rite of Passage program is there's that part in there, you know, we follow Anana's descent into the underworld. And for her to be reborn and come back, she needs to get the food of life and the water of life. And and the food of life is, you know, people preparing the food for us and cleaning the house and doing those things. But the water of life is quite often that part that gets overlooked. And that's having our spiritual and our emotional needs met. And you can feel really lonely and alone when, for any of us, we all know that you can feel so alone, even in a sea of people, when you don't feel like someone gets you, when you don't feel understood, when you don't feel heard. And, you know, I know so many women hear but you had a healthy baby. And a part of us is like, well, yes, of course. You know, we know how important that is, but what about a healthy mother? You know, what about a healthy birthing experience? Where's the help that, you know, 1 in 3 women have that traumatic birth experience, and 1 in 3 women experience postnatal depression. You know, like it doesn't take
or other forms of mental health as well now. Like,
exactly.
Definitely.
And I myself, you know, I denied I had postnatal depression because to me that was just it would have just been more failure. There was no way I was going to go, and I've got postnatal depression because I suck at this whole motherhood gig thing. It was like, no, I'm good. You know, it was only through my healing journey where I got to really look at that and admit it and feel all the feelings and, you know, and feel the guilt and feel the anger, you know, that I wasn't supported, feel the shame, you know, just all of the things. And it's why we're here having these conversations. Right. And yes, Brittany, absolutely. You know, that pressure to be the perfect mother, to be the super mum, to have the natural birth. I thought I was just going to have this natural birth easily because my mum did with both of hers. Didn't even think about it until all of the shit went downhill really quickly. But again, through my self-discovery and through that whole, you know, healing journey is where I realize it's a rite of passage and no one gets out of it.
No.
Without some crunchy bits happening.
Definitely
Those
not.
Challenges are where we learn. We learn our own beauty, our own strength, you know, and that's where we get to heal, and that's what this program is about. So, all right. so many great questions. We've done the support network. Do you feel, and I know we've touched on this, but do you feel like you're fully healed from your experience? And if not, is there, what do you think could help you get there?
Yes and no. Like, I definitely think there's two aspects to this. I mean, I've got two healthy children, they're beautiful girls, and I don't feel that moment defines who I am as a mother.
Yeah.
So in that respect, yes, I've healed because I've done a lot of inner work to realize that moment didn't define me.
Good.
And that there's a lot of other things that come with the definition of who I am as a mum. So yes, in that respect, I have healed from that, but there's scars there that I think I'll always take with me. 100%.
They're our battle scars.
Yeah, there definitely is. Yeah. And, when I'm talking to a pregnant woman or someone who's just had their first baby, and they are so fresh sometimes.
Yes.
That's
such a good
so
word.
Fresh.
Yeah, so fresh.
Yeah.
All right. So is there anything else that you'd like to share with any new mothers or women who are pregnant, or, just, I don't know, information, any insights, like we're saying, when we have our challenges, when we have our rite of passage, there's medicine that we find, there's treasures that we find, there's gifts that we find. And again, I know we've touched on that, but is there any specific gift, that you feel that you could share?
I've said this all the time, I think, since my first birth with Ella, and that was expect the unexpected.
Yes.
Pretty much is my best piece of advice, is expect the unexpected. I think that, yes, have a plan or have an idea for how you would like things to go. Do you want to have a home birth? Do you want to go, is there a specific hospital or a specific doctor or a specific midwife that you want? What are the things you do want and what are the things that you don't want? And it's good to have that there. But it's also good to remember that this is something we can't control to a degree. And, being prepared to expect the unexpected and be able to go with the flow there is really important. I think what I said before is in the sense that, the birthing experience, and particularly for those women out there that may have or are going through postnatal depression or some sort of postnatal anxiety. I went through that after I had Marley, is that doesn't define you either, right? There are so many other parts of who you are as a mother that defines you, and there's so many other parts of who you are as a woman that define you as well. And that part of you as a mother is not the only part that defines you. And I think that we are so conditioned these days to, once you become a mum, mum precedes everything.
Yes, doesn't it what?
We explain everything through the lens of being a mum. So there's words like mumpreneur, which I can't stand. And because I'm like, why do I have to be a mumpreneur? I'm an entrepreneur. Can't I be both people? Yes. And I think that's a good thing to remember, is that being a mum doesn't define all of who you are, and that one experience doesn't define all of who you are. And I think just be conscious. I think the art of being conscious about how you're feeling is important. And if you had a really beautiful experience, celebrate that.
Absolutely.
Be conscious of that. Accept that, embrace that. That's amazing. And if you had an experience that wasn't how you wanted it to go, and you are carrying some trauma, be conscious of that too, and work through how you can heal from that, and what are the steps going to be that are going to help you, or this, we were talking about this before, was, what can you do to help yourself have a better experience next time if you're going to have more children?
In the subsequent birth.
Yeah, or what can you do to serve others in that moment too? Yeah.
And that's it, every birth story is valid, positive, negative, anywhere in between, and I think it's also important to remember that birth stories can evolve and change over time. Quite often, there's this space of no story, and then we might get into that very clinical story where it's like, oh yes, I went into labour at 9, and then by 11 o'clock I was 2 centimetres dilated. You've got that very logical, linear idea of your birth story, and then all of a sudden there's more layers that come up, and sometimes we can get stuck in different parts, but to identify too much, you know, with the trauma or where we were feeling like a victim, because there's not many other experiences in life where you feel so vulnerable, like so raw, so broken wide open, where people are seeing you in ways they haven't seen you before, like you said with your husband.
Physically and emotionally and mentally, like leave your dignity at the door.
Right, and that's it, like modesty after birth. Right? You're like, oh, whatever.
You know, then you got a child attached to your boob. I remember the first time we went out for dinner after I had Ella, and it was like, I had to go out to the car. Like, I was so... I don't show my body. I'm not a body shower. And that's not a bad thing. Like, if you love to show your body and walk around half naked in your house, go for it. But that's just not me. Yeah. Like, that's not how I am. Yeah. So I was so mortified about having to get my boob and feed this child in public.
Oh my God.
And, but the funny thing is, I look at women feeding their children, I go, oh, that's so beautiful.
But back then, and it's only been like in the last few years where, you know,
I'm certainly not a don't feed your child in public. I think if you want to feed your child in public, go for it. I think it's a beautiful thing, but I struggled with it.
We've had such a big movement in the last few years about not shaming women for public breastfeeding, because all the reasons we won't go into right now, but I'm sure you know them. So yeah, you know, again, showing our age and how long ago we birthed, it really was, you know, you'd have to strategically try and put this
so much work
cloth over their face. But
I was scared I was going to like suffocate the child.
God. Yeah.
There's so many things wrapped up in that.
There was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I feel like we've covered so many amazing things. Thank you to those of us who have joined us here and those who are going to watch the replay. If you have any questions at all, then please feel free to ask us.
Yes.
You know, we will both be on having a look later, and if Stacey's not on, I'm going to shoot her a message and go, Stacey, what about this part? So, you know, please feel free to connect in with us here. And
thank you so much for having me. I feel like we need to hug now.
Okay.
It was beautiful.
So yes, so amazing. Thank you for being here. Please, you know, if you're going through any trauma or, you know, you're not quite at that place where you're recognizing it yet, reach out. You know, there's so many amazing groups. There's so many incredible healers, and we love supporting. We love supporting the mothers. When we heal women, we heal the world, and that's what we're here for. So thank you, love you, have an amazing day, an amazing week, and I'll see you for our next birth story interview next week.
Yay! Thank you so much.